Hey now, ladies and gentlemen. Hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. Hour number 3 of the line on Talk 99.5. Talk995.com, Andrew McLean, who.com, and Real Talk 99.5 TV on YouTube. Make sure y'all are subscribed to us on YouTube. We've done a good job of building up those numbers. You can watch all of the shows right there on the YouTube and see us as we do this show live. We do it live. You can see it live. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. A couple things. Jack Links 500 at Talladega, April 24th and 26th. And you've got your chance to win tickets by texting the word Talladega to 205-545-9950. Many of you have done that already. That's got you entered into the contest. I don't think you get one entry per text. I think you just get your name in once you hit send Talladega, and then after that, they'll draw a winner. You can also get tickets at TalladagaSuperspeedway.com or call 877-GO-TO-DEGA. Then an even bigger deal, the 10-year anniversary of Talk 99.5.
Man.
It was this year, 10 years ago. 2016 was the birth of Talk 99.5. It was also the birth of Andrew McLean and The Line. Same year. Almost at the same time, about a month or two apart. That was back in 2016. But 10-year anniversary. Jawbone Jam. We got Brother Kane performing. We've got Stone Horses. We've got Cattle. It's at Iron City on May 15th. You can purchase your tickets through Ticketmaster.com. Just search Talk 99.5 or Jawbone Jam or whatever. One of those two will get you to the tickets. Get your tickets if you haven't done it yet. We're going to have a good time. Or get them at IronCityBham.com, which I think also will direct you to Ticketmaster. But whatever you want to do, whatever's easiest for you. Now, No Kings protest. I've seen a lot of pictures. I've seen a lot of videos, and none of it was really all that surprising to me, with the exception of this one No Kings rally in particular. And I think this was in Washington, D.C., as a matter of fact. And you had the crowd, and y'all know how many liberals are in D.C., so it's a pretty big crowd. You had a couple guys, probably gay, which is fine. And they were singing America the Beautiful. But they were changing the words and trying to get the crowd to sing along to their version of America the Beautiful. Here's a little sample.
Found thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining, beautiful thy immigrants,
who hail from every land,
from every land.
thy grace and work and diligence,
Grace and work and diligence,
like gifts from God's own hand.
Gifts from God's own hand. America,
Thy grace shall yet remain.
thy grace shall not remain.
You greet the poor,
To greet the poor,
who reach the shore
reach the shore
with open arms again.
with open arms again. America, for gracious God, forever waves of grace.
So here's the actual lyrics that they sang. For beautiful thy immigrant, who hail from every land, by grace and work and diligence, like gifts from God's own hands. America, America, by grace shall that remain, to greet the poor and reach the shore with open arms again.
You know what? Oh, beautiful. 4 homeless people all in this country. Come on, man. How about take care of that? Oh, fruitcake.
No, they're worried about immigrants. Screw the homeless people. Screw the vets.
Gosh.
Screw American citizens that are down on their luck and suffering from addiction or homelessness or mental health, mental illness. Screw those people. We're worried about the immigrants who are like gifts from God's own hands. Now, the No Kings protest, which took place Saturday, had little fanfare as they were much smaller than previous demonstrations, and I found that part of it kind of fascinating. It's like, is the wacko liberal Donald Trump's a dictator kind of thing losing momentum? Because you can only participate in so many protests and go through so many elections before you have to ask yourself, is he really a dictator if I'm able to protest and say all these awful things about him and also cast my vote every 2 years? Would a dictator actually let me do that? Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Iranian protesters over the past months have been murdered in the streets. Literally murdered. And yet you're out in the street going, there's a dictator in America, and I'm going to protest him. If you were protesting an actual dictator, you'd end up like the Iranian protesters. You'd end up dead. These protests are being organized by and funded by progressive far-left groups, including Indivisible, the 5051 movement, and MoveOn.org. You know about that. This all started with the 5051 movement, which was, it was supposed to be 50 protests in 50 states, one message or one movement, whatever it was. And there was a couple of organizers. I think one of them actually worked or was a congressman or a congresswoman, or was like an aide or something. It was somehow tied to Congress, this 5051 movement. And now it's built into this thing where roughly 500 organizations with a combined $3 billion in annual revenue are backing these protests. And it also includes well-funded Democrat-aligned nonprofits and explicitly socialist and communist groups, as well as being funded by Soros, Alex Soros, who runs the organization now. Indivisible, which is the lead coordinator for many of these events, have received millions of dollars from Soros, have millions of dollars from the Open Society Foundations. There was one documented grant that was a 2-year, $3 million grant awarded in 2023 to Indivisible, with additional funding flowing through the network year after year. So they are well funded, but again, it brings up the question of why were these smaller than previous protests? Are they losing steam? Is it possible that most Americans are like, wow, it's nice outside. I think instead of going and hanging out with a bunch of people that ain't wearing deodorant, I would rather go spend time with my friends or my family or take my dog to the park. Could be. Bubba Rumble on the line. Bubba, what's up?
Full disclosure, I admit I've been a little resistance to these No Kings protests, but they got me this time. Trump is literally Hitler, and I'm a libtard now.
I hate that for you.
Libtard.
Just kidding. Protests are retarded and gay. Changed my mind.
They are pretty dumb.
They are. So, I had heard there was one of these things going on again, and this has got to be one of the dumbest protest titles of all times, like 0 points for originality. But we didn't have any around my part of Arizona here, and I can tell you exactly why. There's a numerical equation out there that would explain all that, because the latest voter registration numbers coming out from where I live, we only have 7% of registered voters in this county are Democrats, and it makes a difference.
Yeah. Big difference.
I think that number's still a little too high. I'd like to see like minus 0.5, but 7%, they just don't got enough people around here to do any of this crud. Now, the first No Kings protest, there was about, I'll give a generous estimate of maybe 100 of the senior citizen libtards showed up at the probably the most prominent intersection around here, and it was a bunch of people in rascal scooters with walkers and stuff with their stupid signs. And normally when that happens around here, they tend to bust people in from out of town, like from Las Vegas is a place that I've heard that they bring people in here to try to make a show of it here. But nobody honks for them. Nobody really cares. But this time there was nobody. So, yes, even less numbers than not many.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's the reports that I've seen. It's been that way in most cities across the country. Like there just wasn't a big showing, and
perhaps it's because the funding's drying up now that the USAID scam's been exposed and eliminated, and there's just people are watching the money trails from the Open Society and other such horrible organizations a little closer now too. It's possible,
It is. I think that's probably, with some of the fraud that's been exposed thus far, I think that's probably a big part of it, because it wasn't like Soros was the only funder for these protests or riots or whatever they ultimately turned into. Like there was a lot of different organizations, a lot of NGOs, and as you mentioned, USAID, that had been funneling taxpayer money into these protests, and now that they're kind of, in a sense, being forced to be organic, we see how much support they've really got.
Yeah, and throwing a smattering of Hollywood weirdos with their money and stuff too. That protest in your hometown, which I'm sorry to hear that. I apologize to the people. Was it Anniston? Is that where you're from?
Aniana.
Aniana. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you think that was an organically organized protest, or do you think those people were maybe brought in from other places?
No, I think it probably was. I don't know that anybody was busting to there, but that is a very conservative city, and so I think.
Was it the silver hair libtards or the young stinky purple?
No, it was a lot of silver hair.
The silver hair. So they emptied out the retirement home for the day. Come on, guys.
Pretty much. Yeah, free ice cream for everybody. All you got to do is stand in front of the courthouse for 2 hours.
Well, like the only thing I can say to anybody who did go to any of those dumb No Kings protests is, guess what? Trump's still your president today.
That's right. You can't do nothing about
it. All right, I'm out. Hey now.
Cousin. Hey now. There's Bubba Rumble. More of your phone calls coming up if you want to get in. 205-545-9950. Also keeping an eye on a possible press conference, White House press briefing from Caroline Leavitt. All that and much more coming up here on The Line. Hang tight. All right, let's keep it rolling. Again, White House press briefing. I do want to bring you some of this if she hops on stage here in a minute, just to get her opening remarks, because we've got a lot going on with, as you know, we closed out Friday with the Senate sending over to the House a bill for funding TSA, but it left out ICE. It left out, a lot of the Homeland Security stuff. And the Senate just left. They didn't give Mike Johnson, Leader Thune didn't give Mike Johnson a heads up on the fact that they weren't funding all of this other stuff. He just cut a deal with Chuck Schumer and left town. And the rest of the Senate just left town. And so nothing got solved. And the House is like, no, we cannot pass this. We're not just going to fund one agency and then tell the rest of these agencies. I mean, you want to talk about on a human level, like who this is affecting and the people and their families that it's affecting. I mean, no matter what you think about ICE, these are still people that need a paycheck. You don't talk about the Border Patrol. You don't like Border Patrol. There's still people that need a paycheck, some of which, by the way, may be voting for you Democrats, or at least used to vote for you. And they're holding those people hostage. It's absolutely disgusting, all while they go on vacation. Earl's in Talladega. Earl, what's up?
Not much. Them old folks showing up at the No Kings rally, those are what you call yellow dog Democrats.
Yellow dog Democrats, which would be Democrats from back in the day. That, back when the Democrat Party used to be for the working man. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Well, no, not just that. There's some people that are so indoctrinated to being Democrats, the Democrats could run a yellow dog on the ticket and they'd vote for it.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I think a lot of those have left, but you're right. There still are some hanging around, and they're just kind of oblivious to the fact that the Democrat Party has left them. Especially a lot of people in the South in particular. I guess I was thinking of blue dog Democrats.
My uncle was a union man, and the union was after them to vote Democrat every time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there like that. And really, I think a lot of people need to thank Donald Trump for coming along and getting a lot of those union people and lifelong Democrats, especially in the South, to hop over to the other side and realize that, hey, this is kind of what we wanted. I mean, it's Donald Trump, the stuff, his policies are really Democrat policies from the 70s and 80s. It's nothing new. And so it was a realization for a lot of people that the party had left them. And they didn't realize it until Donald Trump came on the scene in 2015. And they're like, wait a minute, this is what I support. And this guy's a Republican. And next thing you know, you got new Republican voters. So, but unfortunately, not all of them see it.
Oh, yeah. You can go back and play some of the old Chuck Schumer tapes from when he first came on board. And he sounds just like Trump.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, listen, I appreciate it, Earl.
All right, y'all have a blessed day, bud.
Thanks, buddy. Hey, there's old clips of Trump as well that are even on. I got one that I found where he was talking about Iran, and he's basically saying the same exact thing back in the 80s and the 90s about Iran is what he's saying today. I'll see if I can find that. But Caroline Leavitt at the podium. We'll stick with this for a minute and see if we get any information out of it live at the White House.
It's no surprise that we are seeing the remaining elements of the regime become increasingly eager to end the destruction and come to the negotiating table while they still can. Despite all of the public posturing you hear from the regime and false reporting, talks are continuing and going well. What is said publicly is, of course, much different than what's being communicated to us privately. As a result, President Trump issued a 10-day pause to postpone planned strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. This remains a truly once-in-a-generation opportunity for the regime to make a good deal with the United States, permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions, and stop acting as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. If the Iranians reject this golden opportunity, the greatest military in the history of the world continues to stand by to provide President Trump with every option available to ensure this regime continues to pay a grave price. One way or another, Iran will no longer have the credible ability to threaten the United States or our allies, which is, of course, the overall objective and mission the president set out when he launched Operation Epic Fury. Unfortunately, even as President Trump is working hard every single day to protect the United States from foreign enemies, Democrats on Capitol Hill have failed to do the same here at home by keeping the Department of Homeland Security unfunded. Over the past 6 weeks, Democrats in Congress have pushed our air travel system to its breaking point and inflicted massive pain on Americans with their reckless political games. 500 TSA officers quit their jobs. Thousands more were calling out sick at record rates due to the lack of pay. This resulted in security wait times exceeding 3 hours at major airports across the country, creating nightmares for millions of Americans. Overall morale among TSA staff plummeted as well. All of this creating an unacceptable heightened security risk. Because of the Democrats' unwillingness to do their basic job of funding DHS, President Trump determined that these circumstances constituted an emergency, compromising American security. That's why last week he accordingly signed a presidential memorandum directing the Secretary of Homeland Security to work with the Director of the Office of Management and Budget here at the White House to use those funds with a reasonable and logical nexus to TSA operations to provide TSA employees with the compensation and benefits that would have accrued to them but for the Democrat-led DHS shutdown. This bold and necessary action by President Trump will ensure our TSA workers receive their hard-earned paychecks. It should not have come to this point, but President Trump will always do what's right by the American people, and he found a way to do that, to get TSA paid. Ensuring that these federal workers who perform critical public safety responsibilities can feed their families, pay their rent, and show up to work is something the president was honored to do. But this moment should be an eye-opening one for the American people. Let's be clear about what is happening. Democrat members of Congress are more than happy to put your safety at risk because they oppose the president's and his administration's efforts to enforce our nation's immigration law. Democrats refuse to fund ICE because they want millions and millions of illegal aliens to pour into the country just like they were under the Biden administration. They want murderers and rapists and thugs to remain in your communities rather than be removed by ICE and Border Patrol agents. The Democrats created this mess. They are the reason for long lines at airports and tens of thousands of employees going without pay. Once again, President Trump is cleaning up their mess because he cares more about the American people than destructive, petty, partisan politics. With that, I will take your questions today. Here in our new media seat, we have Wid Lyman. Thank you for being here, and why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. Happy Easter.
Thank you. You as well.
2 questions for you. Thank you. There are some concerns the administration is starting to change its position on deportations, border enforcement, possibly asylum policies. What would you say to Americans that are somewhat concerned that the shift has happened?
Sure. Well, while there has, of course, been a change in leadership at the Department of Homeland Security with former Senator, now Secretary Mullen, joining the president's cabinet, I can assure the American people there has not been a change in policy. It has always been the policy of this president and this administration to deport the worst of the worst illegal alien criminals from our communities. That's something I know Secretary Mullen remains wholeheartedly committed to doing, and it's something that is overwhelmingly popular with the American people. And it's something that is necessary to protect our homeland and to prevent deaths of Americans in our country. Just last week, Sheridan Gorman, a young woman in Chicago, was shot and killed on the street walking with her friends outside of her university by an illegal alien from Venezuela who had no right to be here in the first place. And it's despicable that Democrats are currently defunding the department that's responsible for removing illegal aliens like that. And I would also add it's despicable that the lack of coverage of this young woman's case, of her life, and the way that it was tragically cut short. I saw a survey over the weekend that I'd like to bring to all of your attention. This is the media coverage of the case of Sheridan Gorman. You have ABC News has spent 1 minute and 19 seconds between 2 days when this case was first alerted. You have CBS, 2 minutes and 1 second. You have NBC, 23 seconds spent on the life of a young, beautiful American woman whose life was taken short by an illegal alien who should have never been here in the first place, when we are in the middle of a battle on Capitol Hill with a major political party, the Democrat Party, who wants to defund the agency that is responsible for protecting Americans. I think her life was worth more than 23 seconds on cable television, and I think the people in this room have a responsibility to report on cases like this, because it just exemplifies why the president believes so strongly in deporting illegal aliens from our communities. And thank you for the question. Dasha, go ahead.
Caroline, I have two questions, one on Iran and one on DHS funding. On Iran, the president has said that the administration is talking to a new and more reasonable regime. How confident are you that they are legitimate and have enough grip on power? Marco Rubio said earlier that he's not sure and it's not clear whether they will be in power. So are you also talking to other factions? As the president is trying to make a deal, how do you ensure that you're making a deal with the people who can actually implement it?
Well, that's part of the ongoing process that's taking place and the ongoing negotiations. Of course, anything that they say to us privately will be tested, and we will ensure that they are being held accountable to their word. And if they are not, the president has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately behind the scenes. When the president says more reasonable, again, these folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes privately in these conversations than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are now no longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States and they strung us along in negotiations, and that was unacceptable to the president, which is why many of the previous leaders were killed. So again, this is another historic opportunity for Iran to do the right thing, to rid themselves of their nuclear ambitions and to come to a deal with this president and the administration, or again, they will see the grave consequences of the United States Armed Forces, which they are continuing to see every day throughout this operation.
On DHS, how long can the administration keep paying TSA without action from Congress? And not to be hyperbolic, but given the airports were really the pain point that was pushing both sides to talk to each other. I mean, do you see a way for DHS to reopen? Is it possible this keeps going through the midterms?
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, of course, the president just can't keep signing presidential memorandums and proclamations every time Congress fails to do its job, and every time Democrats are holding our entire country hostage, picking and choosing which programs and agencies they want to fund just because they don't like this administration's policies. That's not how it's supposed to work. They voted 7 times against funding DHS over partisan and political reasons. And so, again, the president has stepped in to do the right thing at this moment in time, but the president is also encouraging Congress to come back to Washington to permanently fix this problem and to fund and reopen the Department of Homeland Security entirely.
Caroline.
Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. 2 questions, one on TSA, one on Iran. On TSA, for ordinary Americans watching the briefing, how long until everything goes back to normal at airports after the president's action? And then on Iran, on the time frame, President Trump initially said about 4 weeks. Secretary of State Rubio on Friday reportedly said it might be another 2 to 4. Is 2 to 4 the current ballpark that the administration is thinking?
With respect to the timeline, again, the president, commander-in-chief, the Pentagon has always stated 4 to 6 weeks estimated timeline for Operation Epic Fury. We're on day 30 today. So again, you do the math on how much longer the Pentagon needs to fully achieve the objectives of Operation Epic Fury, which I will reiterate: destroy the Iranian Navy, destroy their ballistic missiles, dismantle their missile and drone production infrastructure, significantly weaken their proxies throughout the course of this operation, and then, of course, preventing Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. To your first question, Stephen, about TSA and airports, nothing will be truly normal again until Democrats do the right thing to fund this agency fully. Again, the president has stepped in the meantime to do what's right to end this crisis that we've had at air travel and at airports across the country in the meantime. But again, Congress needs to come back. Democrats need to fund the Department of Homeland Security so we can formally and fully get these great employees paid long into the future.
Caroline.
Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. 2 questions regarding the financial costs of the war. Back during the Persian Gulf War, 1990-1991, Arab countries paid for the vast majority of the cost of the war. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. Who's paying for the cost of this war? Will those Arab countries step up to do just that?
Well, I think it's something the president would be quite interested in calling them to do. I won't get ahead of him on that, but certainly it's an idea that I know that he has and something that I think you'll hear more from him on.
And then secondly, the cost of diesel is averaging at $5.38 a gallon right now. What's the message from the Trump administration to truck drivers who are dealing with those high fuel costs right now?
Again, we understand, we hear you, we see you, we are fully tracking this short-term fluctuation in oil and in diesel prices, and that's why the president and the administration have continually announced robust actions to provide stability in the global energy market. As you know, political risk insurance, one of those actions, allowing countries to purchase sanctioned oil just to increase the supply. In the meantime, we've worked to release 400 billion barrels of oil and refined products as well. We issued the 60-day Jones Act waiver. All of this has, with the goal of increasing supply to create stabilization in the market in the meantime. But the overall message, as we've repeatedly stated, is, again, these are short-term actions and short-term price fluctuations for the long-term benefit of ending the threat that Iran poses to the United States of America, our troops, and our allies in the region, and ensuring that this regime can no longer control the world's free flow of energy through the Strait of Hormuz, which is something the administration continues to tackle day by day as well.
Jennifer. Just two questions. Which Jennifer?
I'll go to both of them.
Go ahead. So two questions. One on China and one on Iran. On China, ahead of the president's trip to Beijing, will there be a working level meeting with Secretary Bessent, Jameson Greer, et cetera, and when will that be?
I do expect cabinet officials to travel to China ahead of time. I don't have a readout on their schedules for you, but this is something we typically do with international travel, as you know. So I'll talk to the Treasury Department and the cabinet myself, and we'll get you that answer. But we do expect them to move ahead of time.
Okay, and thank you. And on Iran, if Iran is kind of cherry picking what tankers get to go through the Strait now and contemplating big tolls on those tankers, is that consistent, or how is that consistent really with the president's message about really wanting the Strait to be fully open? Does the administration support a regime or system where Iran is effectively charging tolls on these vessels to access?
That's not something we support, and I would reject that they are cherry picking. In fact, as you know, these tankers that are moving through, the 10 that were previously announced and now the new 20, the announcement of 20 additional tankers, which we expect to see over the coming days, are a result of the direct and indirect talks that are taking place between the United States and Iran. So you wouldn't have seen those tankers if not for the president's diplomacy and his team engaging on this matter, which we expect that compliance moving forward. And it's, again, something that we're working on very closely.
Caroline.
Sure. And behind me, in the back right there, you put up your hand very excitingly. Go ahead.
Hannah from News Nation.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking my question. I have two for you real quick. There are reports that Republicans are weighing cuts to health care in order to make way for that $200 billion for the Pentagon and Operation Epic Fury. Is that a trade-off that President Trump supports?
I've seen these reports. I haven't spoken to the president about it, nor have I heard this being discussed in any high-level meetings here at the White House. I don't want to weigh in definitively because I just haven't heard that being discussed here in the West Wing.
And then secondly, I know President Trump says we're ahead of schedule in achieving his military objectives in Iran. He laid out that 4 to 6 week timetable for this conflict, and we're now within week 5. So how do you square kind of those two?
Well, 4 to 6 weeks estimated timeline. Again, you just said we're on day 30 of the operation. I just provided you with some of the updates from the Pentagon directly in achieving the objectives, and the military has been enormously successful. I think we should all be very proud of our armed forces for what they have done over the past 30 days. The mission will continue until the objectives are achieved, and that 4 to 6 week timeline does remain right now. I don't have any updates for you on that.
Yeah, like others, one on TSA, one on Iran. On Iran, I know it's tough to engage in hypotheticals, but I feel like this is one that you could engage in. If the president does seek...
Probably not, but let's see.
If the president does seek, or the United States seeks a ground war, does he intend to get congressional authorization of that march?
Look, the president has been asked about boots on the ground or alleged ground operations various times. He's obviously declined to rule them out. It's the Pentagon's job to provide maximum optionality to the president. It does not mean he's made a decision, nor would he ever notify the media of such decision as not to tip off our enemy. With respect to abiding by Congress and the rule of law, that's something the administration will, of course, always do, and it's something that we have great respect for Congress. The president does with military operations. In fact, prior to the launch of Operation Epic Fury, as you know, the administration gave a courtesy notice to Congress in the Gang of Eight, and top-level administration officials and cabinet secretaries have gone to Congress multiple times over the past 30 days to provide those courtesy briefings to Congress when requested.
TSA, quickly, I've been asked by multiple Trump supporters that have said, given the fact that the president on that Friday gave that memorandum informing DHS to pay TSA workers, I know there's a lot of negotiations involved in a shutdown of this size. Why did the president not sooner issue that payment to TSA workers?
Well, it's because of the Democrats voting 7 times against reopening the Department of Homeland Security that we came to a place of an existential crisis. I mean, you saw the lines at various major airports across the country, American travelers really paying the price for Democrats' partisan games. And so the president worked with his legal team here at the White House and the Office of Management and Budget to find a solution to take care of the emergency that we were seeing in air travel across the country. And it's because of the president that TSA agents are being paid. But again, he's calling on Congress to do the right thing, to come back to Washington and to fund and reopen the Department of Homeland Security fully. Sure.
Hi, Lindsay Ellis from the Wall Street Journal. I'm trying to square the 4 objectives laid out by the administration with the goal of reopening fully the Strait of Hormuz. Would President Trump declare victory and wind down military operations if the 4 objectives are met, but still passage remains quite slow through the strait?
Look, as I've said repeatedly and as the president has laid out, the objectives of Operation Epic Fury are as follows: destroying the Iranian Navy, destroying their ballistic missiles, dismantling their defense industrial infrastructure that produces those weapons that have long threatened the United States and our allies, and then, of course, preventing Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. The full reopening of the strait is something the administration is working towards, but the core objectives of the operation have been clearly defined for the American people by the Commander-in-Chief. Garrett.
The president posted this morning about, his threat that on leaving Iran, he said we might blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, Harg Island, and possibly all desalinization plants. Under international law, striking civilian infrastructure like that is generally prohibited. Why is the president threatening what would amount to potentially a war crime with the U.S. military? And how do you square that with the administration repeatedly saying that the U.S. does not target civilians?
Look, the president has made it quite clear to the Iranian regime at this moment in time, as evidenced by the statement that you just read, that their best move is to make a deal, or else the United States Armed Forces has capabilities beyond their wildest imagination, and the president is not afraid to use them. That's not what I said, Garrett. And you're saying the word potential for a reason, because I'm sure some experts are telling you that in your ear to try to ask me that question. Of course, this administration and the United States Armed Forces will always act within the confines of the law. But with respect to achieving the full objectives of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump is going to move forward unabated, and he expects the Iranian regime to make a deal with the administration.
To that end, which of those objectives would destroying a desalinization plant most help?
Haley, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. I want to follow up on Iran. When you're describing that the Iranians you're in contact with are being more reasonable this time around in discussions, what specifically are you hearing that is leading you to that conclusion, and how are you defining what's reasonable versus unreasonable in that regard?
I'm not going to detail the private and sensitive conversations that are taking place between the United States and Iran right now.
But generally speaking?
Generally speaking, the president gave you the answer. What we're hearing from them is more reasonable. They have agreed to some of the points the United States laid out, as the president said last night aboard Air Force One. But again, as for the specifics, as these negotiations are ongoing, we're not going to broadcast them to the world unless the president chooses to do so, which he has the full right to do as the leader of the free world.
On Cuba, the president threatened to tariff any country that would send oil to Cuba, but now the U.S. is letting this Russian tanker to Cuba. Is this a policy change, or is he willing to let more tankers into Cuba now?
This is not a policy change. There has not been a formal change in sanction policy. As the president said last night, we allowed this ship to reach Cuba in order to provide humanitarian needs to the Cuban people. These decisions are being made on a case-by-case basis. And as the administration has said, Cuba's non-functional economy cannot be be fixed unless they undergo dramatic political and leadership change. But there has been no formal change with respect to sanction policy.
So you could expect more tankers to go to Cuba?
Again, these decisions are being made on a case-by-case basis right now.
Thanks, Caroline. You addressed this a little bit in the opening, but just to follow up, because Americans are sort of seeing these conflicting messages between the United States and Iran. I know the president insists that negotiations are underway. As you just mentioned, he's also said that Iran has agreed to most of the 15 points. We just heard from Iran again. They're saying no negotiations are taking place. They're calling the proposal excessive, unrealistic. So how do you square that? How do you explain that discrepancy between the two?
I think the American people are smart enough not to take the word of a terrorist regime that has chanted death to America for 47 years at their word. And I hope the journalists in this room are wise enough not to take an Iranian regime that has repeatedly lied about our country, about our values, about everyone in this room, frankly, for nearly 5 decades. So I think the American public are smart enough to understand that.
And just to follow up on the objectives, you've laid them out, but I know the president has set a deadline for April 6th in just 1 week. What does the president need to see to not move forward with those strikes by April 6th?
Well, I think he said it in his Truth Social post this morning. He wants to see a deal over the next 10 days. That timeline is waning, several days left, and we'll see. I won't get ahead of it. We'll see what happens in the end of the 10-day period.
Caroline, thank you. One on Iran, one on the shutdown. The president continues to say the U.S. is in conversations with a more reasonable regime, but there are now hundreds of U.S. Special Operations Forces, including Navy SEALs and Army Rangers in the Middle East, as well as thousands of other troops already deployed. So is he trying to end or intensify the conflict?
The president is focused on achieving the objectives of Operation Epic Fury. With respect to forces that are on the ground in the Middle East, it's the job of the Pentagon to create maximum optionality for the commander-in-chief. It does not mean the president has made any additional decisions. Again, he remains focused on ensuring that the Pentagon continues to achieve the objectives of the operation that was launched 30 days ago, and we're well on our way to doing that.
So if an American sitting at home hearing him say, I want to talk, but I keep seeing them send troops to that region, what are they to make of what's going on?
There's 2 tracks here. The president has always said that diplomacy is his #1 option and priority. Again, he tried earnestly, in good faith, to engage in diplomacy with the Iranian regime prior to this operation being launched in the first place. He wanted to strike a deal, and he sent his top negotiators to do so. They spent extensive amount of time and effort trying to strike a deal, and unfortunately, the previous regime, again, many of those leaders no longer with us here on Earth because they faced the consequences of the United States military. So if there's ever a chance for a deal, again, the president is open to listening, but it does not deter him from focusing on the military objectives that he set out 30 days ago and that our military is continuing to achieve day by day.
On the shutdown, he signed the national emergency order last Thursday, making sure TSA officers will be paid. There's still other civilian DHS employees, however, who are not being paid.
Yes.
He signed something similar to ensure they also get paid?
Look, the president will always look into ways that we can make sure that the American people are being taken care of and doing what's right by the American people. But again, it's ridiculous that the president even has to go to the length of working with the legal team and the Office of Management and Budget to identify these funds. It is the job of Congress to fund these agencies. And Democrats in Congress have voted 7 times against funding the Department of Homeland Security. Congress should come back and they should get it done. The president, again, made the decision to prevent this existential crisis we were seeing at our nation's airports across the country that was only going to get worse, and that's why he wants Congress to do his job.
Thank you, Caroline. Since you mentioned...
I'll go to you as well.
Since you mentioned Easter and prayers, I wanted to ask you about something the Pope said yesterday. So Pope Leo said yesterday, and I quote him, God does not listen to the prayer of those who wage war. Can you comment on that?
I think our nation was a nation founded 250 years ago almost on Judeo-Christian values, and we've seen presidents, we've seen the leaders of the Department of War, and we've seen our troops go to prayer during the most turbulent times in our nation's history. And I don't think there's anything wrong with our military leaders or with the president calling on the American people to pray for our service members and those who are serving our country overseas. In fact, I think it's a very noble thing to do. And if you talk to many service members, they will tell you they appreciate the prayers and support from the Commander-in-Chief and from his cabinet.
Caroline, thank you. President Trump told the New York Post that a response is coming shortly to Tehran attacking Israel's largest oil refinery. Is there a timeline on that? Is that tied to the success or not of the negotiations?
I don't have any updates for you on the president's comments.
Does consider the IRGC in control of Iran?
Well, look, as Secretary Rubio said today, the leadership is very fragmented. We have really neutered their intercommunication systems, and that's part of this process of diplomacy to continue figuring out exactly who's in charge. I know they appointed a new Ayatollah, haven't seen or heard much from him, and so that's part of this diplomatic process that's underway right now. I'll take a few more. Solon.
All right, we'll go ahead and hop in here because we got to hit a break. But a couple things there. Nothing really new, I don't believe. But you hear from the mealy mouth reporters, well, Donald Trump says he's going to do this, this, and this. That's a war crime. Is the president endorsing war crimes? Here's the thing. If Donald Trump were to be doing things that were that outside of the law and that illegal and that outside of his powers, it would have been easy for the left and for Democrats to hem him up on charges or impeach him or whatever it is they want to do or punish him in some way. But there's nothing there. And she pointed out, she said, I don't remember what verbiage he was using, but he was using a particular word to say, like, well, you know, allegedly this, allegedly that. She says, and that's exactly why you're using that word, is because you're being told that there are no war crimes taking place, and that's word games that you're playing. That's what the left does. It's what the media does. They play word games, and they do it to try to deceive and manipulate and propagandize the American public. And God bless Caroline Leavitt for having to deal with these people that use those tactics every single day. It's truly disgusting. Mandu bringing you this part of the show. MANDUU.com. Couple days left, by the way, on the big deal that we've got going on. I know a lot of people have been on spring break and everything else, but you've got 2 days left for your chance to get in. Try Mandu out and sign up and get the March deal that we've had going on. What is the March deal, you may ask? Well, it's 10% off your first month. 10% off whatever you charge for your first month right off the top. And then after 90 days, if you stick with Mandu for 3 months, after that, you'll get 5% off for as long as you do Mandu. As long as you stick with it, you'll be paying 5% less than you would any other time. You just got to sign up by the end of March, which would be, what is that? Tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day. So get in there, try it out, see if it's what you like. I think it will be. It will change your life. I cannot stress to you guys how much this will change the way you view yourself, the way other people view you, and get you into that shape that you want to be in for summer. Because whether you're at the beach or at the lake or whatever it is you're doing, you want to look good for summer. And I don't care if you're a man or woman, you're 18 or 80 years old, Mandu is for you. A 15-minute workout with a personal trainer, come on, man. You can't beat it. I've been doing Mandu. I'm about 300 sessions. I'm over 300 sessions in. I think about 350. And I wouldn't still be doing it if it wasn't doing nothing for me. It's made a dramatic difference in my life. And it will for you, too. Just call them. We got 3 locations, one here in Birmingham. It's in Homewood, actually. We got one in Huntsville and one in Tuscaloosa. All of them waiting on you. Got a free session for you. If you want to call Homewood, here's the number, 205-438-6003. 438-6003. And then all the other locations right there on the website, mandu.com, MANDUU.com. AJ hopping in to relieve John Bird, since John Bird's been working since this morning. Steve West was out, and so working the long shift. And I got to imagine for you, AJ, that you never want to get the word that you've got to you got to work the tail end of the line?
I mean, that's not always like ideal, but if I gotta do it, I gotta do it.
Because you're a company man.
Well,
Joe Cumulus is so proud of you. He's so proud of you.
Well, plus we couldn't find nobody else to do it that was willing to do it.
We brought John Bird back in, and we're still shorthanded. That's how bad it was. Listen, it was bad there for a minute. I mean, when we were without John Bird, I mean, if somebody was sick or went out on vacation or whatever, like it put us in a spot to where, and you're kind of, you're what do we call you? Assistant program director. So you've got the responsibility of kind of coordinating that kind of stuff, especially on the producer side when somebody's out and you've got, 2 other people to work with.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like, what do you do if you got 2 out? But it all worked out. We made it happen. And John Bird being who he's still in this honeymoon period, so he had no problem doing 8 hours at a time. But that'll wear off pretty soon, I'm sure. He'll get back in the groove and realize how taxing that is.
Mm-hmm.
But
then the excuses come like, oh, why I can't do something?
Yeah, that's when those come around. But he did get some free lunches out of it. So that was good. Valerie Vining got him lunch 2 days in a row. And boy, did he love that. Did he love that? All right, so still a lot to get to. We got Iran, we got the shutdown, we got much more coming up in hour number 4 of The Line.